The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't
The
care.
BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Taping this over the weekend. Not a lot of people would get us to get the studio up and open on a Sunday. But this is one of my favorite people, and this was the day that she could do it, and she's busy, and she's doing about 19 things right now. So here we go. Lena Dunham, what's happening?
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor.
Well, so you have the season finale, which by the time people will hear this, it will be Sunday will be approaching, Sunday night HBO.
Yep, it's coming.
But you're filming season 2? Do I have
Filming-
that correct?
Filming season 2. We just calculated today, Allison Williams and I, we are a quarter of the way through shooting season 2.
Wow. So
So-
did you start working on season 2 like even before season 1 had gone on the air or no?
We did. HBO they do things, it's not TV, it's HBO, so they do things in their own special way. So they actually started us writing scripts. They didn't promise that the show would get made, but they did order some scripts before the show aired. So we were sort of in the writer's room plotting some new adventures, but not knowing if we'd actually get to bring it to fruition. And then when the show, they picked it up, I think, 2 weeks after we aired initially.
Okay.
So we were sort of proceeding like it was happening, but constantly knocking on all the wood in all the vicinities.
So, I mean, I always get worried with this stuff because the show premiered. I thought it was fantastic, especially for a pilot. And, immediately because it's the internet era, it's 2012, everybody's got to weigh in. Then there's a backlash, and then there's a backlash to the backlash, then there's a backlash to the backlash to the backlash. Are you even aware of this stuff as it's happening, or do you stay away from it?
It's interesting because it's I'm sure you are very, as a person who's very in existing, in, I'm not saying this very articulately, but in various media forms and has a big internet following. Do you consider it part of your job to sort of stay up on the conversation about what you're doing? I always want to ask people because I'm trying to figure out how to do it in my own life.
I avoid it because I think you can read the wrong thing and it can get in your head. And, you're always, the people who are likely to complain about whatever somebody's doing are more likely to be complaining about it than praising it, because nobody goes on a message board just to go, oh, this person's great, and that's all they have to say.
I know, it's true. I think about the things I never leave a good Yelp review for a restaurant that I love. I just go there and then leave and feel great about having been there.
Yeah, well, your thing was interesting because, the show comes out, you got a lot of good press going into it. Then the pilot was terrific, and you established 5 or 6 characters that I felt like I knew within a half hour, and then it's like nobody could even figure out how to pick it apart. So then the narrative became, oh well, all these people that are on this show, they're just they lucked out. They were all born on third base. It's like you would have thought you were like Jane Fonda's daughter or something. It's like, what are you talking about?
That was a really funny thing to me was the whole nepotism storyline. I get it more maybe with Allison and Sasha, who have dads who are kind of active in the entertainment industry, but I really did sort of want to challenge all the people crying nepotism to actually tell me who either of my parents were, just because it's
Right.
the contemporary art world. So it's I was okay, I'm Lori Simmons' daughter. Please give me just in one sentence, give me the the concentrated version of her Wikipedia entry. You cannot, because she's
Right.
she's had a lovely career, but she's a feminist photographer from downtown New York. It's not it really doesn't have a really one-to-one ratio with getting a pilot and establishing that, but at the same time, being defensive about it is such an uncool look. You know what I mean?
Well, I also like the insinuation that you hired Brian Williams' daughter, that somehow pushed things over the top. I mean, Brian Williams has had a really good career. He certainly has, a reasonable level of fame. I think people respect what he does. I don't think anybody would be like, I'm not going to watch that show. Oh, wait, Brian Williams' daughter is on? Oh, now that changes everything.
Well, it's really funny because in my house growing up, we only watched Charlie Rose and weird PBS forms of news. So there was so I didn't I'm a Brian Williams fan now, but I really didn't know who he was. Literally till I met him, I was picturing who I believed to be Peter Jennings.
Yeah.
So again, just like my sports knowledge is poor, so is my knowledge of newscasters and picking them out of a lineup. And I kept saying I wish that I was a kind of brilliant Svengali who'd created a girl band of people with famous dads to take over America, but I just didn't have that kind of foresight.
So the show, how many episodes have it been on now? I think 7 or 8. 8.
We had our 8th episode last week.
And you've already hit that point where people feel like these characters are their friends. And the season finale is going to happen and their friends are going to go away. I know my wife feels that way, where it's just my friends are going away. This is terrible.
I heard what you said about how your wife felt when she was watching the show, and it was every dream that I'd ever had come true. It made me so happy. Thank you.
Well, the first two, Sex and the City is not the comparison to the show. I actually think Louis is, but Sex and the City was the first 2 seasons. I feel were similar because then Sex and the City went crazy and became glamorous and kind of became an unrealistic show. But I actually thought the first and second seasons of that show were pretty realistic, and it did feel like it was relatively normal people, and she always felt like those were not her friends, but people she could have been friends with. Or
yeah, even when I started watching Sex and the City, I was 12 or 13 when Sex and the City came on the air, and I remember even then understanding that it was sort of leveling the playing field for talking about certain issues that affect women that had heretofore been silenced, kind of,
right.
If that makes sense.
And the relationships with women and some of the petty stuff that happens, and just how you can have this group of 4 or 5 people, but really 2 of them are close and they're kind of tolerant of the other 2. And that's the stuff that your show is really tapped into. You have these 4 friends that really
kind of hate each other.
Yeah, they're not totally friendly. So how much of that was based on your life?
So much. I think that my most tortured relationships have been with other women. And I think that's the case for so many girls. But I think about my best friend who sort of the Marnie character is based on. We're not to put words in her mouth, but she's not here to fight me on this, but I feel we are a couple that's deeply in love but spends 3/4 of our time feeling rejected and hurt by each other. Just her ex-boyfriend was just saying to me, he was when we were dating, for the 4 years we were dating, he was I really think we spent more time talking about your relationship than we did about our relationship. She'd just be in bed being Lena did this thing that made me so crazy. And I was sort of amazed that I even had the power to make somebody feel that way. It's a really complicated thing. And then you start to wonder sort of how much do we have in common and how much are we afraid to be apart? And those are the kinds of questions, especially when you can't really answer when you kind of haven't become who you're going to be yet. And so I was interested in exploring that, and also exploring how women make each other so angry just by sort of being what the other is not. The Jessa character makes everybody crazy just by virtue of the things that don't bother her in her life that they feel shouldn't bother them. There's so much sort of spying on, looking at what's on everybody else's plate and feeling weird and jealous and confused about it. And that's been really amazing stuff to explore with an ensemble of women my age. And
you had everything in the first, slight spoiler alert here, but I feel anybody who's listening to this has probably seen the shows. Everything in the first couple episodes led to the scene when the boyfriend found the diary with his buddy and then doing the performance, and then the 2 best friends have the falling out, which the drink, it was I don't know if it was intentional that the drink wasn't a total throw in the face. It was almost she half-assed the throw, but it still doused your character. But
I'm so glad you noticed that. That was actually the director of that episode, Richard Shepard, told her to do it, and I didn't know she was going to do it. And I think it ended up working out perfectly because Allison was so scared to throw a drink at me because it just felt so
right.
off base that she sort of did it limp-wristed. I couldn't believe it was happening. That was a truly organic moment.
Oh, good. So how much of that stuff are you ad-libbing when you're out there? Because I get the feeling that even though it's scripted, it's not totally 100% scripted.
It's not. And I think some of that is the Judd Apatow influence because he's so into the idea of sort of figuring out who the actors are and then playing on that. Just because he's correct in assuming that you get some of sort of the most natural, fascinating stuff that you couldn't have conceived of when you just like let actors play around. But
Yep.
so we do. I would say I'll do like 3 takes that are tight to script, and I always like try to be a real script Nazi about it and say like, okay guys, we're doing 3 takes, we're not having any fun, and then like no one truly respects me and they have fun anyway. And then after that we sort of go crazy, and like there's 80% of those takes like that you and no one should ever see. That's just like us making each other giggle, us trying things. I feel like 3/4 of them I end up like taking off my top at a moment that's completely unnecessary, and then there's like a tiny percentage of like real gems that come out of that.
So you have like the Christopher Guest school where the actors are basically ad-lib. He just basically gives them the situation, they ad-lib. And
which is I think when I met
enthusiasm.
when I met Larry David, I met him backstage at Conan and gave the stupidest intro ever where I went up to him and said, both our initials are LD, which I like felt would somehow like really establish a quick kinship between us. But like considering I've seen the show, I should understand that that's like not the direct path to his heart. But he did tell me he was like, I said like, that must be tough for you writing and acting at the same time. He was like, well, I don't write, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because he basically just comes up with like the framework of 7 situations.
Totally. He's basically just like, he's like, I'm going to go over to this battered women's house and offend some people. Let's do this, guys.
Well, so Judd Apatow, you made a movie called Tiny Furniture, which was made for how much did you actually spend? Like $30,000? What was the?
I spent $25,000 to shoot it, and then another $25,000 to finish it. So it ended up being a $50,000 movie, which at the time seemed like I couldn't believe how much money I was spending. I was like, felt like I was like, taking a bunch of people on a ship to Hades. I just couldn't believe I was doing it. And now I recognize that, like, that's, even though Girls is not a big budget show, it's like, our craft, it's our pizza affair is the $50,000.
So Judd Apatow emails you out of the blue, and 50% of you thinks it's one of your friends playing a joke.
Like, probably 70% of me. Like, I just couldn't, because he titled the email from Judd Apatow, and I couldn't conceive of a world in which somebody who was Judd Apatow felt the need to, like, announce it in that way, especially because I won't tell you what his email, I won't share his email address on the air out of respect, but it's not any, like, magical secret code. It's, like, pretty clear. Yeah. It was pretty clear it was Judd Apatow. So, Judd Apatow at hotmail.com. But anyway, so I was completely shocked that he would address himself to me in that way, but then later knowing him, I get that he's like sort of humble in that he's not just sort of humble, he is humble, but he like never thinks anyone remembers him. He's like he's got like still a very endearing like high school wallflower quality that hasn't gone away.
What was the best piece of advice that he gave you?
He's given me some amazing, he's like, I feel that he's given me an inch and I've taken a mile in terms of the picking his brain part of it. He said this amazing thing to me. The thing that I kind of reference the most is when I was writing sort of towards the end of last season, and I was the relationship between my character Hannah and her boyfriend Adam was starting to develop, and it was like I kind of couldn't stop taking it to this kind of like vulgar, grimy, like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas place, and he was like, why don't you let a little romance happen? He was like, write some romance. Romance is hope. And when he said that, it was like part of me wanted to vomit, and part of me was like started to cry because I was like, this is all I've needed to know in my work life and my personal life. Like it really like opened something up for me in like a way that like many years of therapy could not.
But at the same time, even though that was the sweetest episode and that was Adam's breakout episode, he still peed on you in the shower, so you kept it real.
It's true. There's no, I can't fully go there, but I can it totally. It's still like whatever through my own like twisted lens or something. It's so funny because when I wrote that peeing on in the shower scene, I was like, oh yeah, this is just like a funny thing that happens between people, and it was the scene that, HBO's amazing and like has let me go buck wild, but they were definitely like, do we really want to do this? Like, is this really where we want to like in a new loving relationship? Like, is this really what we want to portray? And I was like so delusional that I was like, what? That's like the most normal part of the entire episode. What's weird is when they like kiss and hug at the end.
Listen, when you scare HBO, you've really accomplished something.
Oh my God. Someday when I write my memoirs about this period of my life, I will talk about some of the weird, like and things I tried to put in that I couldn't even believe. Like, I was like, I can't believe I am like a 25-year-old girl trying to like have this debate with a network. What kind of monster am I?
Well, especially a network that runs Game of Thrones.
I know, seriously. I just started watching Game of Thrones. My dad is so into it, and I had to start watching because I heard him from the other room scream. And my dad's like not a super emotive person, and I heard him be like, "Who would steal baby dragons from a woman?" And I was like, I better start watching this show.
Well, as a father of a daughter, I can't help but watch shows like this and start fearing when my own daughter becomes a teenager and then living in her early 20s and things like that.
How old is she now?
Well, she's 7, so I have some time.
But I feel like now, like when they're 8, is when they start to display like preteen ambitions.
Uh-oh. Well,
no, don't mean to scare you. I've just been a serious babysitter for a long time, so.
Well, don't worry. I'm constantly scared. But it seems like you're very close to your parents. So what are your parents' reactions to the show? Because it could not be a more honest, frank, unflinching portrayal of a young woman in her 20s.
Well, my parents are incredibly supportive, and I think part of it, I mean, they're both artists. My dad's work is like sort of, I'd say it's pretty sexual content. I'm actually talking to you from my parents' living room right now, and I'm looking at a giant painting that my father made that's of like a prehistoric woman with her sort of butt and vagina out, like sort of facing the audience, like bending, washing her breasts in a pool. And that's just like what's in our living room and what's happening right now. So wow. I think that like there was definitely a sense like my parents are sort of really stressed the idea that like what you make and who you are linked but aren't the same, and also that like you need to be able to express yourself or you'll perish, like sort of like a little bit of a utopian idea about self-expression. Like I remember being little and sort of my teacher being like, how does your dad's work make you feel? And like I didn't even know it was an option to sort of like have embarrassment about it. And so I think that they've really like sort of, put their money where their mouth was and taken that same attitude about what I do. But that being said, my dad once said to me, he was like watching the show, he was like, I'm so proud of you. I love the show. Watching you in a sex scene isn't great for me because it kind of just, it goes against nature for like a dad to see his daughter doing those things. He was like, and I want to watch it because it's like part of your self-expression and I want to know what you're up to, but like I'm going to keep my eyes fairly squinty.
Right. And your character on this show, Tiny Furniture, seemed like you were just, that seemed very autobiographical. This one, it seems like you at least made some efforts to create some distance, right? Like she's from Michigan and there's some other things in there that it's not totally you.
Totally. I made her from Michigan actually because that's where my very beloved agent Peter Benedek went to college, who's also your ginormous fan. So that was I haven't done very many odes, and then I made her from the town of his rival college, not from the town that University of Michigan is in. So I totally messed the whole thing up. But I created some kind of feud without even knowing it, and then just walked away like it was nothing. But I did make an effort to sort of differentiate, not because Hannah isn't close to me, but because I really felt like there's something about the way that I was raised and the way that the character in Tiny Furniture was raised, sort of like in this sort of niche artistic world in Tribeca that didn't feel like it had sort of the correct amount of accessibility for what I wanted this show to do. And I was also really interested in sort of New York as the place everybody comes to, find their dreams, to make their dreams happen, not the place where you're born and where it's easy for you. And so it was really important to me that the characters sort of be discovering this place and that they have a different kind of like naivete about the city. And also that I was like, if I'm going to play this character, knock on wood, for a long time, I would love to find some differences and sort of have our lives diverge. So
Adam, is that somebody that you personally would date, or is that the kind of guy that in your worst case scenario, you'd get sucked into dating somebody like that?
Good question. I feel like it goes back and forth depending on the episode. I feel like an older version of me would have been very excited to date Adam. My current self would be attracted to certain aspects of his like sort of worldview, but would understand why I should stay away. So that means you date him. Do you say that means I'd date him? Yeah. Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. It's a disaster. But it's funny, like that character, that Adam character, like he started out as just this caddish. He started out as sort of like, the proto, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say buddy. I just said it. Sure. Okay, yeah. Cool. He started out as like the proto buddy and then turned into this sort of like oddly sensitive kind of, to me, this sort of like kind of like great symbol of like romance and like this kind of like it turned into kind of this like great love story at the end of the season. And then it's so funny to see that like the audience some people do respond to that, but some people are like, you know, this just gets worse and worse. Like it's interesting to I feel like I can also like divide the world into two kinds of women, which are like those who understand what's attractive about Adam and those who do not. And and I get my main sort of feedback about the show and the characters is via Twitter, and because I don't really read the reviews, but I do love to like read whatever like funny college girls are tweeting at me, and they're the ones. One girl just tweeted at me the other day, and she said that she'd invented a word for Adam, and it was weird-adorable, like weird adorable made
excellent.
Into one. I thought it was pretty good.
My wife loved him from the first episode, and I was like, this guy's disgusting. How can you like this guy? Like, now you're making me question our marriage. She's like, no, he's good. He's got a good heart. I could just tell.
There's a line that was cut. I think it was cut from episode 7 where maybe it's not. He does have a good heart. I think he does too. I'm with your wife, but I get where you're coming from too. But there's a line where Jessa sees Adam for the first time, and like, you know, all she's heard is like Hannah's talks about him like he's this like Adonis who's sort of destroying her life, and Jessa looks at him and she goes, "That jug-eared monkey." And it's like that was sort of our attempt to call it out. Although I didn't love calling Adam Driver, who's very handsome, a jug-eared monkey to his face at a table read.
Well, he's been, you know, everybody's concentrated the stories and the discourse from the first few episodes were about the 4 girls and about you and Judd Apatow, your story. It seems like he's kind of gained steam as a subplot here, like, because I just think he's excellent, and I think that's a really hard role, and I think it's hard to get people to like you when you're playing somebody who's unlikable but kind of secretly likable. There's just a lot of layers going on, and I don't think a lot of people would pull it off.
No, the minute that he was the first actor that I saw for the part, and he just like killed it immediately. He used to be in the military. He used to be a Marine, and so he has this like kind of like intense work ethic and extreme. I feel like I can say whatever I want about him because there's no way he'll ever listen. He's like one of those people who doesn't watch himself on TV, would never read an interview with himself, would never listen to an interview with me. Like he sort of lives in his own creative bubble. He rides a motorcycle. He wears big army boots. Like there's so many like sort of great signifiers. And when he first walked into his audition, like carrying his motorcycle helmet, and in my memory, he was wearing dog tags, although that is not true. And I just was like, I do not even know, like, what has hit me, but obviously we need to do something with this person.
Mm. And I'm blanking, Jessa.
Jessa, yeah.
That's somebody you've known since you were 11.
Mm-hmm. We've known each other since I was 11 and she was 12. I had her name's Jemima Kirk, and I had like a deep friend crush, what is now commonly known as a girl crush on her. I mean, to the point where when I was 11, I was like, is this what it means to be in love? Because I just wanted to follow her everywhere, wear everything she was wearing. Like, you know, all of high school was basically just like her dragging me with her to parties, and like I would have been content to just like sit and like hold her drink and her purse and her lipstick for a million hours. And I feel our friendship has leveled out a little more since then, but she just had this like intense magnetism, which she didn't ever act until Tiny Furniture, but it was sort of whatever she did, she sort of like brought her A game to, but in this way that was so effortless. She's really like, when she has a baby, and like when she was 9 months pregnant and we'd walk down the street together, like guys would look at her and walk into walls. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. It's the most stressful kind of friend to have when you're like a chubby 14-year-old girl, and a little bit when you're a 25-year-old girl.
So this show's been on for 8 weeks. I wouldn't say you're famous, like in the, you know, like Janet Jackson famous, but I'm sure when you walk around now, you must notice people looking at you and things like that, right?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So I'm so not Janet Jackson famous. You know, it's interesting because I'm sort of hanging out in the neighborhoods that are the target demographics for the show. You know, I'll be in Tribeca or I'll be in Williamsburg. Like, I think it feels like more people know about it than actually do. Like, if I'm looking at the numbers, like, I'm sure I would be completely unmolested in like, you know, a mall in Kansas, but it just happens to be that I'm like spending time in these areas that the show's sort of designed to excite. And it's like, Jemima and I were actually just talking about it today, like, it's mostly lovely because it's just people sort of going like, love the show and keep on moving. The other day a guy did stop for a really long time by our set and be like, I just wanted to tell you my sister loves your boobs.
What?
It was so disorienting because I was like, wait, it's your sister? Like, I was kind of excited, but I kind of wanted to go away. Like, it was the same way I feel when, like, a construction worker whistles at you where you're like, how dare you? Please continue to do that.
Right. So how do you feel like this is going to change? Like, I mean, are you dating or are you single right now?
I'm seeing somebody now, and it's very, I'm seeing somebody now, and I decided I had to, only the other day, I came up with, like, a good response that I was like, because it's kind of a counter to my, like, idea about how to live my life to be like, I don't discuss those things. But again, like, I also never want to drag anybody into, like, the, annoying thing of having to be the significant other of someone who shows their boobs on TV all the time. So I decided my answer was, I'm seeing someone, which I thought sounded very adult, and I was impressed with myself about it.
So when you're dating somebody, though, I can just imagine, like, if I was dating you, I would be worried half the time that every conversation, argument, whatever, then all of a sudden I'd end up in the show in some forum.
Yeah.
Like, how do you juggle that?
Well, it's interesting. I used to be really into, like, telling people, like, no, I would never write about you. And then I realized, like, that was the least honest. And it wasn't like I was lying to them. I was lying to me. Like, my hope was that sort of, like, if I entered the right kind of relationship, suddenly I wouldn't want to write about it anymore. And it was only, like, a few months ago that I realized, like, oh, wait, this is kind of like my way of living in the world, and it's not going to go away. And all I can hope to do is just be respectful and not make anybody sort of feel f***ed over by my process or like I've misrepresented them. And I think that people who are with me kind of, like, understand what's going on and trust me enough that they don't think I'm going to do anything to sort of, like, I've really been pretty careful in my work not to sort of, like, shame anyone or call them out and it's really funny because I just got an email the other day from, like, a guy that I dated so briefly my freshman year of college. Like, dating would be a polite term and also an overstatement. And he was like, I've watched the show and I get the sense that, I get the eerie sense that a lot of us went into you and Adam. It was, like, so crazy because I literally haven't thought about him in 8 years. But I was sort of amazed because it confirms that, like, everybody kind of wants to be written about, even if they're seeing themselves reflected in the kind of most nightmarish, narcissistic, like, animalistic character.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know if I answered the question very clearly, but I'm always worried about it because I'm in, like, a fairly new relationship, and it's, like, someone who I think is really wonderful and would never want to make feel bad in any way. And I kind of don't, I get anxious thinking about the exact thing you said. It makes me want to be like, I'm going to give it all up. I'm going to become a farmer.
Well, the irony is the guy, if you did base Adam on a specific guy, he's probably somebody who doesn't have cable.
You are deeply
probably
correct.
never seen the show.
You are deeply correct. Well, it's funny because it's sort of an amalgam of a few people, but sort of the person who was really, like, the seed of it, sort of when the show, it's a terrible thing where it's like you have all this wonderful stuff going on and you feel so lucky to be in the position you're in and you're so excited that your parents can see you. Like, I think my parents thought I was going to be a babysitter till I was 49. I think they're really happy about everything that's going on. And, like, after the show came out 2 days later, I was just, like, upset that he hadn't texted me and been like, good job. And I was like, that is the darkest part of our human selves that does this, so that a boy that hurt their feelings will text them and say, good job.
Right.
But yeah, and then he texted me, like, 5 weeks later being like, what's the name of that restaurant again? And I was like, okay.
Well, it's weird. You get praised because of your fearlessness, because, like, you get naked and you'll have, like, a really uncomfortable sex scene. Like, why is that? Why do people get praised for that? Like, you created an honest character. It almost feels like it's insulting in some way. Like, oh, she gets naked on this show. She's fearless. Like, that's the character you're playing. Like, do you think that's weird, or am I overthinking that?
No, I think that's a really smart. I mean, it's funny. You've just very succinctly said something that I kind of feel in a loose way all the time. So thank you for clarifying that for me, because I think part of the reason I get that is because I'm not super thin. And I think that if no one's like, Emmy Rossum's so brave. She always shows her butt on Shameless because she's got, like, a perfect butt, and nobody is stressed about it, and they assume she's not stressed about it either, but they assume because I don't have a model body type that every time I take my clothes off, it's a battle with myself. And a lot of things are a battle with myself, but for some reason getting naked is not one of them. Like, I just don't feel a deep self-consciousness in that part of my life. And so I think you're really right that it's sort of like there's something really kind of condescending about I mean, I think it's brave to do things that scare you, and this isn't the thing that scares me.
Yeah. So I don't get that part, but the other thing that people skimp over with you, not that I'm the guardian of your career, but
but I really appreciate it.
Well, and I don't mean to sound ass-kissy, but obviously I have you on because I love the show and I think you're super talented. I think you're a really good actress. Like, I think separately of all this, if you never wanted to create a show, I feel like you could have had, an acting career and done different weird roles and just done that. And that also gets lost. How did you even start with the whole acting thing?
Well, I really appreciate that because I never think of myself really as an actor or somebody who has sort of skills in that department. I always sort of think of myself as being like possessed of a pretty limited range. But I always wanted to act when I was a little kid. I always had babysitters who were like NYU drama students, and I was sort of obsessed with what, every one of my babysitters who was like going on an open call audition for Les Mis. Like, I was just like, please let me run lines with you for 5 hours. Like, I just was fascinated by it. But I didn't think, I never got parts in school plays. That wasn't, I wasn't at all validated for that skill. And so I didn't really start, in high school, I went to stand-up comedy school, which is sort of an embarrassing episode in my personal history.
Right.
But I didn't really have a sense that it was something that I would have any skill at. And it wasn't until I started writing screenplays with characters closely based on myself that I started acting in my little shorts and in my screenplays as sort of as a convenience. I sort of thought I'm not in a position to get Tina Fey to be in my movie right now, so I guess I'll just do this till that rolls around. And it took me a long time to sort of admit to how much pleasure that part of the process gives me.
Yeah, but this is an angle that nobody's talked about really. You look at all these shows where you have somebody who's doing all these other things and they're also in the show. Like, I think Seinfeld's a good example, or even the Louis C.K. show, or Larry David show, where, you kind of watch them grow as actors Seinfeld was a really bad actor the first couple years of that show, and he eventually became passable and then decent. And I think Larry David the last couple years is so much better of an actor than he was the first couple years of that show. Same thing for Louis C.K. The last season was the best acting he did. Your acting was good right away, which is what made me think man, this is, I'm not sure what's going on here.
Thank you.
I don't know. I was stunned, especially by that and by how good the writing is and some of the one-liners and stuff. Are those all yours, or do you get them from the writers, or what's the process for the one-liners?
The process for the one-liners is that, I'd say, if I wrote an episode, a fair amount of that is mine, but then I also have an amazing writing staff, and then I work with Judd Apatow, Jenny Connor, another producer called Bruce Eric Kaplan. This season we added a guy called Murray Miller to the mix, who are just expert at comedy in a way that I sort of was, Tiny Furniture is a pretty clear expression of sort of what my comic voice was up until that point, which is there were jokes, but not jokes. And
yep.
And they were really helpful. I think that they kind of turned that part of my brain on. So not only do they, stand by the monitors sort of throwing me lines and throwing me things to add in, Jenny's particularly skilled in that department, but they also sort of turned on the part of my brain that was looking out for that kind of humor. And it was funny because then they had to teach me all these sort of because I didn't watch that many sitcoms growing up. I watched Friends, but I don't have an exhaustive knowledge of situational comedy history. So they'll I'll pitch a joke and they'll be literally that joke's been on Seinfeld 83 times. Or they'll be you just pitched an entire arc from Family Matters. I'm constantly just getting called out for copying things I've never seen.
Oh, that's good. So it's almost like you have a detector committee.
Yeah, totally. Fully.
I did a podcast with Louis C.K. a couple months ago, and we were talking about creativity and how most of the best and most original television shows that have been done, especially on HBO, FX, and the cable networks, was mostly one person. And yet, when you look at the network model of how they do comedies and even how they do dramas, it's not one person, it's a committee, and it's multiple people, and the network give notes, and then they give more notes, and no, you got to change this. And it seems like the best work we've seen on TV the last 12 years has always been one person and maybe two people if they're partners. Why doesn't the TV industry just realize this and just turn it over to one voice like HBO did with your show?
Well, that's such an interesting question because I have to agree with you, which is that for the most part, even, it's Mad Men has writers, but I'm sure Matthew Weiner's, dictating that entire experience. And,
absolutely.
There's we're sort of in the age of sort of like, Svengali showrunners or something. And I think it's a really fascinating thing, because I think that this exists in so many creative industries where it's like somehow, I'm not articulating this very clearly, but the producerial forces do not want to listen to what is true over and over and over again. It's like the essential difference between sort of like being a creative person and being a sort of facilitator. But it's just so interesting. Have you ever seen that movie, the Jake Kasdan movie, The Television Set?
Yeah.
Is it called The TV Set?
I think it's called The TV Set.
It's so amazing, and I was told to watch it by Judd right before I started working on the pilot, and he'd said, like, watch this, and I watched it, and I literally was like, oh, this is like sci-fi, like, this couldn't be what this process is actually like. And everybody I know who's worked in network television, a lot of people who work on my show have previously worked in network television, have said, like, no, that's, the most realistic depiction of the process of making a pilot that exists. And I think, like, it's the fascinating thing that, I've just experienced briefly as I've moved through LA, going to general meetings and encountering various people who are sort of like looking for new young blood, which is everyone sort of goes, we want you to be you, but not too much you. We want you to do that, but also do everything. Like there's this, and people, I think the essential thing that people don't understand is that like the personal is universal, and that the more personal something is, the more people can relate to it, and the more you water it down, the more it feels like nobody made it.
Yep.
And I think that if I mean, this sounds so like Pollyannish, but like if every sort of person in the position to like make new content got that concept, we would see just this like mediocrity would just like disappear, and you'd hate things or you'd love them, but they'd really be what they were.
Yeah, I think Adam's a good example of a character that, let's be honest, having Judd Apatow in your corner probably helps. So your network's only going to mess with you to some degree, and maybe if you don't have him there, you get to a point, and I'm not saying it would have happened or not with HBO, but where they say, yeah, we like everything, but Adam, he's just not likable. Can you make him, what if he worked for an accounting agency? Yeah,
totally. Like, what if he had like a sustainable garden on his roof? Like, can't he just do something nice for people? No, it's amazing that, and I give credit to Judd, and I give credit to HBO for letting like basically the Mr. Big of our show be like, a sex addicted caveman with like, who's like on the autism spectrum.
Yeah. What were the major shows that influenced the show? Shows or movies? Like, do you feel like the show, I don't want to use the word umbilical cord, but maybe like a creative touch of an umbilical cord to different things? What were those shows and movies?
No, that's a great question. I think that, it's funny, when I'm working, I tend not to think about, when I'm actually making the thing, I tend not to think about sort of reference stuff mentally, but in the period before, like right before I start to write, I'm just taking in so much media, and I would say the things that I've thought a lot about in relation to this show are, this is just a smattering, but are like Mary Tyler Moore, My So-Called Life, Strangers with Candy, a lot of Woody Allen, a lot of Nicole Holofcener. Friends is something that sort of just, it was such a big part of, it was the first show that like, I was obsessed. Like I had a trivia book. Like I thought about it constantly. But I loved Felicity, and I've thought about Felicity a lot when I was making this show. I love Mary Hartman, just because it was like such an insane...
Wow, going way back.
Yeah, I love that show, just because it's like such an insane like singular woman's vision, and though it's not the same thing, it had like this kind of demented protagonist who was never asked to be anything other than what she was, and like this kind of, and it's totally surreal and not the same tone at all, but just sort of, I loved the stories about like Louise Lasser, like writing the show on her typewriter at night and like quietly having a nervous breakdown, and then like coming to set and handing everybody new pages. Like I just was obsessed.
It's funny because maybe you never even saw this movie, but Noah Baumbach's first movie was called Kicking and Screaming.
I love that movie.
Okay, because I feel like in a weird way, this is like the female version
that
of
movie
that
was,
movie.
That movie is a big influence on me, and I love hearing you say that. I think all the time about that line from Kicking and Screaming where Josh. I think it's Josh Hamilton's
Josh
character.
Hamilton. The original
says,
Josh Hamilton.
The first Josh Hamilton says, "I'm nostalgic for things that haven't even happened yet."
Yep. Oh no, that was his buddy, his acerbic buddy.
Oh, was it Chris Eigeman who said it?
Yeah. That's
who
it.
was
That's
in
that one.
Chris Eigeman in the pilot was like a total, kicking and screaming nod.
That's all right. I'm really happy to find that out because that was one of my favorite movies. And I feel like Grover and Hannah they probably would have hooked up once or twice, and then he would have probably avoided her, and there would have been a really ugly incident where she called him or something. I don't know. I feel like they would have had some sort of connection for about a minute.
You're so deeply right, and I think that she would have really wanted to sustain the connection with Grover, even though she kind of wasn't attracted to him. Like it would have been. I love that. Grover, are you wearing mascara? No. Yes. That's one of the best lines ever.
Well, because for people who haven't seen the movie or are listening, Grover is a year out of college and wants to be a writer, and basically is just aimlessly going through his life with his buddies who have no idea what they want to do either.
Yeah.
And you kind of the four characters plus Adam in your show a little similar. Like I don't feel like really anybody's headed anywhere special yet. I'm sure some people, at least a couple of the characters as this progresses, will start getting better jobs and things like that. Have you even sketched out in your head what the show might look like in season 4?
We have. We've definitely. It's funny. Jenny Connor, who I run the show with, and I had one night at South by Southwest right after we premiered the show this year. Spent a really long time talking about how every character would die. Like it was almost like 6 Feet Under inspired, just like really morbid conversations. We were like, we don't know exactly where they're going to be in season 3, but we do know where they're going to be at like age 92. Like we had like a really long game plan for them. But I think that it's becoming clearer to me, and like it's been a really amazing process writing season 2 because season 1 was so strong. It was so crystal clear for me. I mean, things changed as we went along, but like I had a real sense of the kinds of stories that I wanted to tell and that I felt like we needed to tell. And then with season 2, it was like suddenly I felt for a moment sort of as adrift as the characters did because like the world seemed both too big and too small. And it was like that I had a real like life meets art feeling writing season 2, and then it got really fun.
When you did season 1, you got the deal to do a pilot. Did you just write the pilot, or did you try to say, screw it, I'm going to try to figure out what this whole season of shows might look like?
Well, Judd, because he does nothing in the traditional fashion, had sort of said like, well, let's just have you write 6 scripts. He basically got HBO to order 6 scripts. I think they were very game about it, but I can imagine that that's a little bit of a gamble when you're dealing with someone who's never written TV and, only made this tiny feature to go, hey, yeah, enjoy, write 6 scripts and we'll see how this goes. But I did, and along with that, like a big sort of, I was inspired by The Wire. I read The Wire series Bible. I don't know if you've ever seen that document.
No.
It's like, there's a Bible that David Simon made. It's like, that he made towards the beginning of the show that is his vision for every season, that is a description of every character, that kind of talks about the places they hang out and the slang that they use. I mean, it's like an exhaustive document, and so I made a much less impressive but still enthusiastic Bible about girls. Which at that time was called the Untitled Lena Dunham Project.
And how long did, like a couple months?
A couple months, how long did it take to do that, or how long was it called
Yeah, the
that?
whole process, yeah.
Let's see, Tiny Furniture premiered in March, and then I made the deal with HBO in April, and then the pilot got greenlit in August. So it was, I now know that I had an insanely sort of like blessed and speedy TV development process, but at the time I was too naive to get it, and it was like the same way that I thought when I was a kid that every child had a country house. I thought everyone. I just didn't get how torturous that process can be for some people, and now I do, and I'm so grateful.
All right. And
I literally could get me saying I thought that every child has a country house is like the worst thing that I've ever said in the public sphere, and I apologize to you.
If you were my daughter, I'd be worried that you were working too hard and that you were just going to break down. Is that accurate, or am I overthinking that?
You and my dad have the exact same set of concerns. He is constantly, I mean, my dad is like will have a very dour way of putting things, so he'll be like, you better get some sleep tonight or you are going to get up, your immune system's going to get ruined, you're going to get sick, you're not going to be able to work, you're not going to be able to pay your mortgage. Like, he will go through the entire series of events that will happen all the way up till me, like, prematurely dying and ruining my life. But I think, I think I'm getting that season one. I definitely, like, I'm not going to say I burned myself out, but I'm going to say that by the end, I think during it, I was sort of like, if I just get through this day, like, it doesn't matter what I eat, doesn't matter if I sleep, like, as long as I come out the other end and we have a show. And I think that, like, part of maturing has been, like, figuring out how, part of my maturation between the two seasons has been, like, I started exercising, I started meditating, like, sort of trying to make, like, healthful choices, because realizing, like, oh, I want to do this for a long time, and that involves, like, taking care of yourself, even if it seems like the most boring, bougie idea.
Coffee?
I don't drink coffee, actually.
Whoa! That's
I know.
the biggest upset of the podcast. I can't believe that.
I don't drink coffee. I sometimes drink green tea, but things I don't do. I don't drink alcohol. I don't drink coffee. I don't smoke cigarettes. I eat sugar, but I am, like, not, like, it's not like a puritanical stance. I'm just not good at any of those things.
You know what? That could be season 4, when you're kind of pressed for what's going to, all of a sudden you get like a nice 16-ounce coffee and then just see what happens.
Well, I once drank coffee for a week, and then I got, like, a case of acute colitis, and so I've always associated the two things in my brain. And my mom's like, that wasn't the problem, but in my brain forever, like, coffee, like, causes me, like, mysterious, hospitalizable stomach ailments.
So what? You must have people coming to you and saying, you've been such a big influence on me. How can I do what you're doing? And there's no right answer for that. What do you tell those people, even though there's no right answer?
Well, there's no right answer, but I also always want to give an answer that isn't just like, stick with it, young one, because, like, I know part of the greatest thing about my kind of college career is I was always really ballsy about, like, writing emails to people I admired. And the most amazing thing was when they would respond, like, with a thoughtful thought. And it's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So I think the kind of my big response is always, like, write things that feel really personal to you and that you're excited about, and don't try to, like, fit into some idea about, like, like, I hear Hollywood needs more pirate movies. Just, like, I always believe that, like, doing the thing you're excited about and surrounding yourself with, like, collaborators you trust is what's going to lead to, like, the most exciting result.
That's a good answer. I always tell people who want to, like, how do I write a sports column? I just tell them it sounds stupid, but just read. And my follow-up question would always be, well, who do you read? And they'll be like, well, and then if they don't have 10 names instantly, then that always makes me suspicious.
I mean, that sounds, like, brilliantly smart to me. I think that so many people sort of want the thing without knowing even what it means. And, like, I'm so glad that I spent time in college watching. I don't get as much time now to watch movies and TV shows as I'd like, but I think being, like, a voracious consumer, that's one of the reasons I have trouble avoiding some of the commentary on my show, is because I'm not Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm, like, a voracious consumer of contemporary culture, and it's a huge part of my inspiration. So it's, like, it's funny to try to do that, but also, like, cut your face out of all those pictures,
Yeah, but on the other hand, see, this is the part that makes me nervous for you is, I thought that affected the guys who wrote Lost, a show that I really loved. They paid a lot of attention to the internet, and at some point, you kind of morph into that consensus mode. Like, I almost feel like some of the decisions that you make just have to be the decisions that you're going to make.
Totally.
Like, don't you feel like you'd get compromised if somebody doesn't like some character right away and it just seems like a recurring theme on your Twitter replies or something? Wouldn't that be planted in your head to say, maybe I should get rid of that character, or maybe I should tone it down?
Totally, but at the same time, there is a part of me that's still, like, an ornery high school girl that's like, oh, you don't like this character? I'm going to make you watch him 9 more times. Like, that's sort of that's a little bit of my reaction, which is like, oh, you think I look weird naked? Get ready to enjoy that for a quarter of every episode for the rest of the time I'm allowed to be on TV. Like, I think that, like, riot girl thing comes out in the...
Yeah.
But, like, it's a real balance. I read this thing that Ashley Judd wrote about, like, people criticizing her face for looking puffy, and she was like...
I read that.
Did you read that thing she wrote?
Yeah, it was awkward.
It was awkward. It was really awkward, wasn't it?
Yeah, super awkward.
But, like, I just love the way that you're phrasing that. But I couldn't tell what was awkward about it. It kind of made me feel shitty about myself for like reading stuff, because she was like, I don't read anything, like it's all between me and my creator. And I was like, maybe I would be cooler if I did that and just like was married to a guy who drove a race car. But I also felt like her was like, thou dost protest too much. It was complicated.
Well, but that's also your generation, because like we launched Grantland a year ago, and a lot of the people that work for us are 31 and under. And your generation is looking at 4 or 5 different things at the same time. You know, you're on Twitter and Facebook and GChat, and you're going through emails, and you're on the internet, and it's just it's like this big public water cooler, basically. So I don't know. I guess
I've stopped GChatting and I've stopped using Facebook, and I have to tell you, I don't miss either of those things. I've been off both of them for like maybe a year and a half now.
Well, that's good to hear.
So that's been good, but I still spend a lot of time on Twitter. Like, my body's reflex when I'm just sitting quietly is to like load Twitter again and again.
Well, it's funny. Like, I think the internet really would have helped certain shows that I grew up with. Like, if we had the internet and message boards in its full form during 90210's heyday, I just think they kill off Andrea. In like the second season, they're just like, what are we doing? The whole internet hates this character. And I think like Ray Pruitt stays much longer. They would have realized Ray Pruitt, they had really stumbled onto gold. I don't know if you watched the show or not. But,
oh, totally. I watched it like over my older cousin's shoulder. But I remember even like when I was like 7, I was like, Andrea's not fun.
Yeah, every Andrea scene, it was like, it was like homework. Just get it over. Let's get back to Dylan.
I just saw a tweet that this girl I know who's 16 wrote today, where she was like, I'm watching My So-Called Life reruns. I wish I could just rewind over the parent scenes. Ugh.
That's another great example. And it's funny because you mentioned that show earlier, and that I actually
love the parent scenes. I love everything about that show, but I love the idea that a 16-year-old was like, why do I have to watch? It's sort of like it's homework for me to have to watch these 45-year-olds kiss.
Right. But that Angela in that show is definitely a distant creative cousin to Hannah, I would say.
For sure. And all my crying or anything I do that looks like on-screen crying is 100% me just copying Claire Danes' face. That lip quiver she does is just so deeply affecting.
So when do you finish the show, season 2?
Finish season 2 at the end of August.
And then what happens?
Then I'm going to be editing the show. And I'm going to do some writing that I've sort of been not putting off, but just not having the chance to do. And I just moved into a new apartment in Brooklyn, so I'm trying to like get that to be the place of my dreams. And my mom and I are taking a trip to India for 2 weeks, which we've been planning for we've been hatching this scheme for a couple of years. So I feel excited about the fall, and then can sort of take a minute and see if I get to make more girls.
And there might be you're going to stop it. I know you have to say that, but
well,
show's not going anywhere. I think there'd be like some sort of riot. And then you have award season coming up. Who knows?
I know. That was something that just never even occurred. Like, I know this sounds like so annoying. Like, once I saw Taylor Swift in concert, who I love, and she came out on stage and she was like, "Hi, I'm Taylor, and you're all here for me?" And I was like, "Get real, lady." Like, I was just so annoyed. But I swear to God, like, the award stuff just never occurred to me. Like, it was just... Like, it was so far from anything I could have imagined. So, we just got nominated for some Critics' Choice Awards, and, I told my dad, because I got nominated for an acting award, my dad was, in the funniest voice that was, both proud but also kind of, just horrified by what the world had come to. He was like, "You got nominated for an award for acting?"
That's great. You deserved it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, listen, I've been doing this podcast for 5 years plus about 2 months, and I think this is the gushiest podcast I've ever done. And I'm sure the emails and Twitter replies will say that. But I just think what you're doing is great, and especially the fact you're only 25, right? Are you 25?
I just turned 26.
26, pretty good. When I was 26, I was not even a bartender yet. So that, I hadn't even aspired to become a bartender yet. So
you're amazingly awesome, and you have a big new fan in me, and I've been reading the blog, and I'm really into it. I think I just didn't know that the world of sports commentary was open to me.
Well, we made an exception, even though I guess we should out you as you don't know anything about sports whatsoever. Yeah,
but I don't. Here's what I know. I know about Venus and Serena Williams. I know that the guy that I have a crush on wears a Yankees hat. I mean, the guy that I date wears a Yankees hat. I know. Okay. This is all I know. Is that bad? Should we break up?
that could be a potential scene where Hannah likes a guy who loves sports and can't connect to anything about his life. That sounds like a potential episode for like season 9.
One of my best friends, Isabel, has a boyfriend who she just moved in with, and I was like, how is it? She was like, it's good, except I just didn't realize there were so many different sports.
It sounds like my wife. My wife flipped out because there was like yet another hockey, basketball, and boxing last night. And this is like the worst stretch for sports right now. It's April to June. It's just nonstop. And she was just like, I've just had it. It's just every night. I've just had it. When does it end? And I was like, it's amazing. Don't worry. Yeah, but yeah, this is a bad stretch. Anyway, Lena Dunham, it's the season finale of HBO. What time is it on the East Coast? Because I watch it on the West Coast when it comes on early. So what's
it's
the East
on
Coast
at 10:30 p.m.
Oh, 10:30. Wow.
10:30,
So they
late.
put you in. Yeah, they put you in the scary. We're not sure what's going to happen during the show.
Totally.
Slot, where
They put us in the like old people should be asleep by the time this comes on spot.
Well, congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
Should
It's
be
such
really
a pleasure
proud.
to
It's a
talk
great
to
show.
you.
Yeah, my pleasure too. Thank you. Hopefully you come on again.
I really hope so. Thank you.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.